Most of us probably think that without language, social interactions would be impoverished beyond recognition. It enables us to reveal our innermost thoughts to others, or, if we prefer, to disguise them with misinformation and lies. It's easy to see that language can be quite adaptive for our fitness, so pondering how language evolved has practical questions, such as whether it evolved in other animals or only in humans. With language, action can be coordinated so that a group of people can act as one. Even if chimpanzees could conceive of a pyramid, they still couldn't build one, because they lacked the ability to coordinate action through language. Language also enables hard-won knowledge to be passed on to others, including our children, enabling culture to proliferate in ways that would not have been possible in our ancestors who lacked language. When language evolved, it must have dramatically altered the subsequent course of evolution. Not only did it vastly extend the range of things that ancestral humans were capable of, enabling them perhaps to outcompete other hominids around at the time, but it is also likely to have had an impact on the evolution of the brain itself. It is unlikely that our languageless ancestors had brains identical to ours, but lacking the appropriate language circuitry. It is more likely that the gradual increase in communicative sophistication led to huge leaps in the way that the mind worked. So great are the advantages of language to our species that surely it must have been the product of natural selection. There is no doubt that non-human animals communicate with each other, in the sense that they have evolved particular ways to convey information like their mood to others, such as a growling dog. But animals communicate other information as well. The work of Austrian ethologist Karl von Frisch on the dancing behavior of honeybees is a major example. Von Frisch discovered that after finding a profitable food source, bees would return to the hive and engage in an elaborate dance to communicate the physical location of the food source and the estimated quantity of available nectar. After witnessing the dance, the bees' hive mates would decide whether to exploit the patch, taking into account its distance and potential yield.
Honeybees have some fascinating abilities, among them being able to communicate by performing a unique dance. It informs hive mates where a newly discovered food source is located. Every cycle of this waggle dance roughly describes the shape of the figure 8. Let's rewind and look in more detail. The bee only waggles on a part of its route, the straight run, indicated here by the waved line. The secret lies in the direction of the straight run, or to be more precise, in the angle between the straight run and the perpendicular, which in this case is 90 degrees to the left. This tells the other bees that food is available 90 degrees to the left of the sun. If the angle is 60 degrees to the right, they'll be flying 60 degrees to the right of the sun.
Another classic example of complex communication in non-human animals is that of vervet monkeys, who have been shown to use different vocalizations to indicate the presence of different types of predators, such as snakes, cheetahs, and eagles.
At dawn, on the shores of Lake Naivasha in Kenya, the vervet monkeys come down from the trees to search for food on the ground. Here they are much more vulnerable than they are in the branches, but there's always a sentry on watch. And for greater safety, vervets don't just have one generic alarm call to warn of danger. They have different calls for different threats. This call warns of a snake. The vervets respond to each call in different ways. The eagle alarm sends them dashing into the thickest tangle of branches where the bird daren't venture for fear of damaging its wings.
It is not only primates who appear to be able to do this. Prairie dogs appear to have a range of distinct warning calls made in response to specific stimuli. For example, they will produce different calls in response to coyote, red-tailed hawk, deer, and humans. Perhaps even more surprisingly, when prairie dogs were presented with unfamiliar objects, such as a European ferret or a black oval, they all gave the same call independently of one another, and were even able to incorporate the color of the predators into their vocalizations. In this case, the predators were three similar-looking women wearing different colored clothing. Giving the same call is important because it suggests that their calls are genuinely referring to particular attributes of the stimuli, such as color, rather than just making random vocalizations. It suggests the prairie dog communication system has rules for generating new words and that these rules are shared by the community, something that is essential if you need to be understood.
The predator is revealed. A plastic coyote without any legs. It seems like an encouraging result. The prairie dogs are certainly being vocal.
What's really wonderful about this is that other individuals are chiming in just in response to the vocalization. So they don't even have to see the stimulus in order to know that this is a coyote, and they start yelling.
Every call recorded must subsequently be analyzed by Con.
We can hear the difference in the calls between the different predators, but that's not really enough for us. What we really need is some sort of analytical tools for measuring what the frequency and time elements in the call are. And so this software here allows us to do this. This is an alarm call elicited for a coyote, and we can hear that it has a series of rhythmic chirps. Let me stop it at this point. We think that each prairie dog has its own individual unique tonal qualities, just like humans have different voices and different voice prints. But even though each individual prairie dog might differ, all the prairie dogs have a common call for a coyote, even within those individual voice print differences. So we think that when a prairie dog is calling for a coyote, they probably know who the individual prairie dog is that's calling, just the same way that we can on the telephone hear somebody's voice and immediately recognize it as a person that we know.
The researcher who carried out these studies speculates that prairie dogs have some potentially innate rules that enable them to produce calls to novel stimuli, although the details of this are obscure. Why might prairie dogs have evolved such a sophisticated system of alarm calls? One possibility is that prairie dogs are preyed on by many different kinds of other animals, including coyotes, badgers, domestic cats and dogs, ferrets, owls, eagles, bobcats, snakes, and of course humans. With such a variety of predators, a flexible system of warning calls would help them to flee from predators. Presumably, the appropriate response to a particular predator varies depending on the specific nature of the predator. Whether any of these instances of communication constitute language as we know it is a long-standing debate, although currently the majority opinion is that they do not. The principal difference is that human language is much more creative and flexible than animal communication systems. Honeybees, for example, are geniuses at giving directions to sources of nectar, but appear unable to use their sophisticated dances to communicate other potentially useful information, such as the existence and location of a rival hive. Vervet monkeys can signal the presence of predators, but do not appear to use their calls to convey information about the quality of potential mates, habitats, or sources of food. Human language, however, is used to communicate information relating to every aspect of human experience. In their landmark paper, Natural Language and Natural Selection, the psycholinguists Steven Pinker and Paul Bloom argued that language has many of the characteristics of complex organs, such as the human eye or hand. Like the eye, language has positive fitness implications in that it enables information to be transmitted more efficiently than by non-linguistic means, but it also allows different forms of information to be transmitted. The linguistic properties of displacement and creativity mean that we are free from making fixed responses about the present moment. With language, we can refer easily to past events, speculate on the future, and discuss any issue that might come to mind, things that are difficult using non-linguistic communication. Pinker and Bloom argue that natural selection is the only known mechanism that can produce the adaptive complexity that we see in language. A particularly difficult problem for non-selectionist theories is how to explain all the costs associated with the specialist hardware that language requires. The comprehension and production of language uses a large amount of costly neural material in dedicated brain regions, such as Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Furthermore, the design of the vocal tract required to make complex articulation possible also has the unfortunate side effect of making dying from choking a distinct possibility. Non-human mammals, and indeed pre-linguistic babies, are able to swallow and breathe at the same time. If language did not arise by natural selection, it is hard to explain how our ancestors could have borne these costs without them being offset by some very special advantages.